Hi, it's Joe here. And this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the most hot topics, and that's inflation. And inflation has affected millions of people around the world, especially here in the United States. And since there are those who are saying that greed has flowed the inflation and it's been the cause of inflation, so we're here to talk about the how these companies do inflation. So with me here is a very good friend of mine. This is Fred Maldonado, and Fred Maldonado at one time was a observer in labor unions he worked with, and became a pastor throughout his years, and he now lives in Las Vegas. He's been here in Las Vegas from Los Angeles, California, over the last 2 years. And before his retirement here in Las Vegas, he was a staff, a crew, and a grip with Jimmy Kimmel in his Jimmy Kimmel show. And so I'm glad that I came to you because you were the first person to open up about like how this inflation is staged. So you don't have an economics background or the financial industry or in the other entrepreneurial sectors or private sectors, but what you do, but you do observe and you know how things work in that business. And so one of the first things you opened up was about the oil price. In 2021, that was when the oil price started to go high. And so what is your opinion here, Mr. Maldonado? I know that you said that this thing of the oil companies staging like this, like a hack, and then that's why they had to raise the price. Do you think it's like some sort of smokescreen?
Well, first, I'd just like to start off to say that just because you don't see a trick doesn't mean there's not a trick there. If we see the magician, it's always a sleight of hand. He keeps it distracted so you don't see what's really going on. And they use, and the industry, the corporations, use kind of the same technique.
Mm-hmm.
With the oil companies, they really expand on that trick. Back in the years when the first oil shortage, we can look and see that there's a we can call it free enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and we also say that supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
So there's sometimes that there's a way to manipulate so that the demand will be low and the stock will be high. So
Mm-hmm.
we have low prices.
Mm-hmm.
But now what the oil companies have done is they've gotten the supply low,
Mm-hmm.
so that go ahead and charge more. Now, what they've done, especially in some places that I lived, I won't say where,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems that the refineries, there was one place where I think for almost 12, 15 years, as the population increased,
Mm-hmm.
they did not build any new refineries.
Mm-hmm.
They still had the old same refineries,
Mm-hmm.
which created kind of an artificial shortage,
Mm-hmm.
since they couldn't keep up with demand.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time is that usually during the summer months when it's a high peak travel season, it seems as though they were always shutting down refineries to make needed repairs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
See all this on paperwork, which again created another shortage. So of course, supply and demand. So of course, since they have a shortage, the demand is high, so they raise their prices until everything goes back online, and they go ahead and stock up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed this through the years, watching this, the price would always go up, and then as soon as the summer season was over, the price would come down because no one's traveling as much anymore. And we could see that in almost every aspect, especially since the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So now the pandemic, we already know that travel was light, so the oil prices should have been low. But it seems as though they weren't really that low.
Mm-hmm.
Not especially for the western states.
Yeah.
They were low, but they weren't that low. At the same time, when Trump became president, he also did away with some of the EPA requirements, which at the same time saved a lot of companies money because now they didn't have to spend money on environmental protection, whatever they needed to do. But then again, the prices still came up. You know, it might have been slight, it might have been low, but they still came up. Now, once everyone started to go back to work, then there was more travel, so now the prices have gone up because now the demand is high. But the supplies were low because they didn't refine as much when we were not working. So, again, at the time when the supplies were low, they were not really maintaining the refineries. So they waited till everyone back to work till again now they had to shut down some of the refineries to do some of the work while travel was going up. So now the prices started to increase. And the oil companies have deliberately kept the supplies low, however means that they see. And so, of course, they raise the prices. And it for them, when they are approached as well, you know, we have to make up for the losses that they had. Well, we understand that. We understand that, especially from a business point of view, especially during the pandemic when businesses were closed. Now the businesses are back up. Supplies were low. They needed to get more supplies. They was having trouble with shipments. People were out of work, trying to bring the people back. Shortage of drivers. You name it, on and on and on. And so they couldn't keep up with the demand. So of course everyone was kind of short. And of course now, instead of everything being back online after about a year now, everything is still high. And why is that? Because they deliberately, all of them, have kept the supplies low so that they can go ahead and keep the prices high and keep going up. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to be a genius. We don't have to be an economic expert to see this. We can just look around and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. Now, we already know I'm not against supply and demand. Mm-hmm. I'm not against that because I know, especially with the small business people, you know, they need to make up for some of the losses. You know, they still have rent to pay. They still have utilities to pay. They still have all these things to pay for. So and of course trying to bring employees back. So yes, their prices have to go to settle that. During this time, there's been raises, and of course what happens when they go and buy their supplies, those companies they're buying from have also increased prices.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So of course they pass it on. So I already know the small business, but we're not talking about the small business owners. Mm-hmm. We're talking about corporations.
Yeah.
Corporations have a surplus. Corporations have money for emergencies. They have all this set aside. But now they have taken advantage of the situation. They deliberately kept supplies low, or they keep it from the public so they can keep the prices high and keep climbing. And what they like to do is they like to use the small business owners to always make a reason for their high prices. And if you watch the news and you keep your eyes and ears open, you will hear them say that. You'll say, well, you know, we're not going to raise prices because of the small business. You know, the small business owners, you know, they want to increase the minimum wage for years. The corporations always blamed the small business owners. Well, the small business owners, they're going to hurt. They're going to hurt. They're going to hurt. So for years and years, they deliberately did not raise the minimum wage, even though housing and utilities and everything else was going up. So their wages have been kept low until finally some people stepped forward and started pushing so the wages will go up. But if we just stop for a minute and take a look and see what's really happening, you know, the corporations have seen how they can sit, and of course they have so many avenues now to blame. Mm-hmm. You know, they can blame the shipping ports, they can blame the lack of laborers, they can blame the lack of drivers, you know, to move all that stuff around. And I have been noticing this for a long time. So inflation is high. Yes, in other foreign countries, inflation is a lot higher than here in the U.S. At the same time, there's other countries that their inflation is lower than what we have here. There's still inflation going on around the world. It's not like we're the only ones.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So before we move on to the supply and demand and other inflation issues, so about the oil, so we had some politicians from the progressive faction in the political arena that have been talking about the corporate greed from these oil companies, and that even during the congressional sessions, they have, you know, had some placards and displays how much, about more than $1 billion, these oil companies have made with the oil prices getting high and all this inflation from these, you know, gas. But it seems like what they're not really explaining is how they're doing it and how they're staging it. I know you've said that, like, how these oil companies stage like an incident, and then they try to, you know, blame it on this and that, and they can have enough money or have enough support to hire more drivers to deliver the oil to other, you know, gas stations. But it seems like what we're witnessing is that's not the case. What they're doing is their form of economic sabotage. They're purposely not hiring drivers to bring all the oil to the gas stations, and they're giving them the excuse or a smoke screen to jack up the price of the oil.
Yes, one of the things they like to say is they don't have qualified drivers. Mm-hmm. Whatever that means. You know, we have to pay attention. There's a lot of words and phrases that are used out there. And one of them is that they don't have enough qualified drivers. Mm-hmm. So what happened to the drivers that they had before that? Did those people go out and look for different work? They work someplace else? I don't know. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that they probably never call them back to work. Mm-hmm. And of course, all they need to do is call one guy back to work, and one guy refuses, and from that point they can say, oh, we couldn't get anybody to come in. And so they like to do that in order so they can keep on raising the prices, because of course it's supply and demand. Well, we don't have enough people out there. I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to use, I don't like to use a lot of examples, but I have to say there was one time here in Las Vegas, mm-hmm. Maybe it was anywhere between 6 months to a year ago. One of the gas stations was short on gas. And it seemed like we were going to have a shortage here in Las Vegas. And the oil company says, well, we don't have enough drivers, so there's going to be some shortage, but we have enough fuel, we just can't get it there. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because it seems like when they said that, when they mentioned that, within a week and a half's time, the gas prices had gone up by quite a bit, and next thing you know, we've got all kinds of gas. No gas station was out of gas. So why was it a week before that they were out because of any drivers? All of a sudden, the gas price goes up, and all of a sudden they have plenty of gas. The deliveries are there. Okay, I mean that really is suspicious. But that's just one example.
They do a good job of smoke screening.
Yeah, there's always way, and everything's on paper. That's one good thing. And I'm going to give you an example about paper. Back in the 70s, I worked for a stereo company. And I worked in the distribution center of the stereo company. And every now and then, now as they sent out stereo equipment, speakers and players and headphones and all of that, when they sent them out to the stores, usually the stores don't pay for them right away. There's usually 90 days, sometimes 6 months before our company gets paid. So this is what they did. What they did was all the companies that they were distributing to, they would make up a bunch of bills of lading, and we would actually go out and pick up all the equipment, set it up on pallets, put them in the trucks, and the trucks would go out to the store. Now our warehouse, the front part of the warehouse, the trucks would go out, on the back side the trucks would come in to offload. So the trucks are going out the front door loaded to all these different companies that never ordered anything, but they were going out. Now, of course, the orders were rejected, so the trucks would come back. So now we'd go to the back side, and we'd have to, after about a week, when these trucks started to come back, we'd have to unload it. But on paper, see, when they would go to the bank to get their loans, on paper would show, oh, look, all this equipment has been ordered, and it's all going to the stores. So now they're waiting for the stores of payment. They would never show the rejection notice. They would just show the bill of lading that these things went out, so they would get their loan.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a very tactical thing that they do there in the corporations.
Yes.
So before we move on into the storage supplies, so one last thing, you don't have to answer this, but so the head honcho executives in these oil companies, so they were kind of like using a lot of smoke screens to try to recover a lot of profit from the pandemic. So do you think that like this must have been like one of their smoke screens that so President Biden blocked the pipeline of the Dakotas.
Right,
and so so that was already the time that they were already retaliating and using the so-called hack, but in fact that it was them that staged it, and then that was when they already began the raising up these gas prices.
Yes, they themselves putting pressure on the administration. Mm-hmm. Because the administration stopped the Keystone pipeline, mm-hmm. and so they wanted it reopened again.
Yeah.
And so in order for them to do that, well, they had to figure out a way to somehow create a shortage. And of course, the barrel of oil, those prices went up. I'm going to tell you right now, our American companies don't pay for that barrel of oil. Mm-hmm. Those are other countries paying for that.
Yeah.
So don't get that really confused, okay? Don't believe their BS. Mm-hmm. They're not paying that. But, the market price, again, they said, well, that's the market price, so, we have to raise our prices, even though they're not paying that, even though they're not really buying a lot of that oil. We have enough oil in this country to supply our country for many, many, many years down the road. So what they've done in the past is they've got license to drill and get oil. And what they've done is they've drilled, and then once they see the oil is there, they cap the oil well. Mm-hmm. So it's just sitting there. Yeah. Now they wanted that pipeline. When Biden put a stop to it, well, they needed that pipeline so they can keep going, because it was already allocated for use and for somebody else. Because the reality was that Keystone Oil was not for us. It was going to be sold on the market for somebody else, which of course they would make a lot more money. So they needed to do something to create a shortage, and of course blame the administration so they can get back to that pipeline. They're trying to say, oh, we need it, we need it, we need it, we need it.
Yes.
And so that's what they did. They just created shortages, and of course, to say, oh, we don't have this and we don't have that, and how can you disprove it? How can you prove them wrong? You know, they have control of everything. You know, they can shut down. Like I said, they can cap these oil wells. They can cap all of this and say, oh, we have no oil coming in, even though it's sitting there. So they like to create these things, and they can keep the prices up, and of course push the administration to do something.
Okay. Well, thank you for that wonderful opinion and comment. So moving on. So one thing I have to say is that, so for me as a business owner, of course, when you really have a shortages, of course, there's no choice but to have to create a price gouge, because you're really in the shortage. Because there's a lot of supply and demand. And even because, you know, even me, when I conduct business, you know, I've conducted, you know, my family has, you know, conduct business with this, you know, people, and they know how to, you know, raise up the price, you know, there's a real shortage. And so it seems like what we're looking at smoke screens, that this is a recovery from the pandemic, or there's real shortages because of some blockades from other countries, or especially like China, because of the coronavirus that's still happening. That's why they block some goods, you know, coming shipping from the Pacific. And so that's what we've been hearing. But, you know, based from what we've been discussing about this, it seems like they were just smoke screens. These companies have a lot on stock in their warehouses or whatever distribution places that they have, and they're hoarding it, and they're purposely not hiring drivers to go deliver the goods to the stores. And so it creates the impression that even the media eats it up, that there's really shortages, and that's the cause of the inflation. So
yes, I mean, we understand supply and demand, and like I said before, I'm not against that. What I'm against is companies taking advantage of that, because you know, they're not just hurting the small business people. They're also hurting
the customers,
the customers, the people that
the consumers who rely on
that rely on that, and insurance companies. You know, the insurance companies also have to pass on that extra cost to somebody, so our premiums go up to pay for all that. So the customer is the one that's always getting the butt of all of this.
Yes.
So like I said, I'm not against supply and demand, but you know, it's these companies that are taking advantage of doing that. For an example, you have a company that says that they sell certain T-shirts, and of course, some of their T-shirts are, let's just say, they're made in a different country. Now that country has different manufacturers for the T-shirts, and this particular company is using one of those manufacturers there. Now, one other manufacturer now, they have a situation that they have to close down their manufacturing. And so the company gets wind of that. So now they raise their prices up on those shirts, even though they're not getting shirts from that company that was shut down. They're still getting it from a different one. But of course, the news says, "Oh, these T-shirt factories are closing down in whatever country it is." And so these people now jump on the bandwagon and raise the prices when they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they keep their warehouses full, but when they sent their stuff out, they tell the store wherever you're buying at, and says, "Oh, you know, we don't have enough. It's going to take a while to get there." So of course they raise their price, and the store raises their price just so they can keep that. Now all of a sudden, everything is going good. Now they have all this stock, and all the stock coming in when they already made it. So now they're able to lower their prices, but they don't lower them like they were before.
Okay.
So these are the tricks. Like I said, just because you can't see a trick doesn't mean there's not one there.
Yeah. So, thank you for that wonderful opinion. So I'm sure you heard about I think that was like in the midweek of May all the way to June, the hot topic of the shortages was the baby formula.
Yes.
So it seems like what we were like seeing is, oh yeah, this is part of their corporate greed, or this is a result of the Trump administration's tariffs and whatever. But they also think that they might be just smoke screens, but they actually have a stock even from before those tariffs thing, or like but they already have a stock there, but they already staging not to provide baby formulas.
They had closed down one baby formula factory because of some issues, and it took them a long time to shut it down. So my opinion
Mm-hmm.
is that company made tons of extra baby formula and put it aside, knowing that the factory was going to be shut down. So now the factory is shut down, so now they have all that supply, so now they just hand out a little supply at a time, and there's a shortage.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're trying to tell us that there's only 4 companies out there that make baby formula.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I don't know how true that is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But again, we can look at it and says, well, what kind of shortage? And the thing is that it was particular formula. It wasn't all the baby formula. It was a particular one that some of the children needed. So it was just that one particular one. They had other baby formulas. It's just the babies couldn't use that formula.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So if you're just joining me, I'm joining with a good friend of mine, Fred Maldonado, who was an observer with labor union organizers and labor unions, and then pastor, and then before his retirement in Las Vegas, was a crew, staff, and grip with the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And so it's very wonderful for you to have you around, and thank you for sharing what these kind of schemes that these companies do. And so it seems like what we're witnessing right now is now this is also being used as a political tool for the midterm elections, and it seems like they're also using this front as like a cover-up, but what they're smoke screening is they're attacking the political party majority, but it's coincidentally the Democrats, and it's the Democrats who are doing everything, well, not all of them, who are trying to address this inflation more. And it seems like, well, abortion is now the issue. Well, we can talk about that another time. Is the motive of the midterms for the Democrats, and it seems like Republicans keep blaming all the high prices in the government, and they keep putting up the smokescreen that it's the Democratic majority in the Senate, the executive, or the Congress for the high prices or the reckless spending, whatever it is that they call it. And then, but really, it's these companies who lobby these people, whether from both parties, who are also staging this kind of high prices. So now we're seeing a lot of write-ups of articles of writers who are probably paid by companies to write that corporate greed is not the problem of inflation, or blaming the government for inflation, or the list goes on. But really, it's just a smokescreen to try to cover up or try to deflect that they were the cause of the high price. And so they're now also staging that this could be one of the reasons why the approvals in the polls from the president to the Congress and Senate are low, is that they keep blaming, oh, it's their fault, but really it's actually them who are causing all these things, and they're blaming it on the government for these. And not to mention that these people who are very pro free market and they're pro extreme neoliberal capitalists who are small government, and they're also putting their pinpoint on the government, even though that the liberals blame corporations, but we're talking about like they're blaming the government, but it's them who are actually stirring up the economic chaos and the economic sabotage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you very much for your time, Mr. Frederick Maldonado.
You're welcome.
And it was wonderful for you to share with you about the current situation, about inflation and the schemes and the smoke screens that the companies hide and then put their fingers on the government.
Yes.